Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Today we have our next session for a study of Surah al-Baqarah, which for today will be analysis on the recent verses we've covered, which was, I believe, verse 40 to 62 or 61. This is the first section that addresses the children of Israel. Peace, Brother Turkey, welcome. So I'm going to share the screen and we'll go over briefly first. So we've talked about how this surah overall heavily covers the theme of guidance, and it basically defines God's guidance as the religion of Abraham, Islam, submission to God, worshiping God alone. So this is the guidance, if you will, and the second half of the surah details basically the religion of submission, all its rights, all its practices. The first half, though, deals heavily with guidance more conceptually and through an example of the children of Israel who received guidance before. And so this is kind of the idea for this section. Starting with verse 40, O children of Israel, remember my favor which I favored upon you, and fulfill my pledge. I will fulfill your pledge, and be afraid of only me, and believe in what I brought down, verifying what is with you, and do not be the first denier in it, and do not sell my signs for a small price, and beware of only me. So generally for me, the way I think of it, that makes a lot of sense and makes it easy for me to rationalize, is God is addressing a people whom He bestowed upon huge favor of guidance. Prophets, the book, etc., which is guidance similar to the guidance that is coming with this prophet and with this book. Yet just having the guidance, having that favor from God, does not make one automatically guided. You still have to follow the guidance. And basically God shows how, in their case, in many of their cases, they had the guidance, yet they didn't follow it. Also, I think the idea is important of, like, in order to follow guidance, you have to place God's guidance above you, rather than placing yourself above God's guidance. Because the children of Israel, kind of like the Jews, have subjected God's guidance under their community. In many cases, rather than subjecting their community under God's guidance. And this kind of connects back to the example of the mosquito earlier, where God presented two reactions to an example or to a sign or a likeness. On one hand, a person who lets the sign guide him, and on the other hand, a person who puts his judgment above the sign, and it's kind of hard to explain. It's just a case of he puts God's guidance under himself. So I guess to put God's guidance above yourself and to follow it, you must first have the humbleness to do what God is commanding, to do the basic obligations which God has instructed, stand the prayer, give the purification, bow with those who bow. Basically, get rid of your arrogance that is preventing you from bowing and from being amongst those who believed and thinking yourself superior, even if they're not Jews in this case. So they literally have to get over their arrogance and their supremacist view in order to submit to God. It's actively preventing them from submitting to God if they have that view. Then God reminds them, like, basically the whole section, one thing I would say overall, destroys the idea of arrogance within their community, because in multiple ways God demonstrates how He saved them multiple times, how they did not even really deserve it. It was God's favor upon them. He saved them from Pharaoh. He saved them again from Pharaoh by drowning Pharaoh. He saved them from their mistake after they worshipped the calf. He still forgave them, obviously, or gave them opportunity for forgiveness. He saved them after they transgressed in saying that we need to see God, and they were seized by the thunderbolt and raised from their death. By the way, StreamYard link is in the chat if anyone wanted to join the stage. Then kind of the second half, I would say, deals with the same concepts, but largely in the context of God's favors as tangible mercies, which one can either be grateful for or one can ignore, deny, and kind of not affect them positively. So we have like God shading them with clouds, bringing down food for them, bringing them to their destination, for them to enter the Holy Land, etc. Bringing them water in the desert for each of their 12 tribes. And then basically they are not satisfied to follow God's command to enter the Holy Land, and they're not satisfied with even the food that God provided them, wanting other things. And this idea of wanting other than what God provided is kind of the underlying logic here. The issue is not so much with cucumbers or lentils. The issue is with them not being appreciative for what God provides and wanting something else, even though it's clearly what they have is clearly from God. So it pretty much mirrors their attitude towards guidance potentially. Like God reveals guidance and they're not satisfied with it. They want something else. And this is not a stretch, because it says here they return with anger from God because they were denying the signs of God and killing the prophets without right, because they disobeyed and were transgressing. So their killing of the prophets is not just random transgression, it's because they don't like what the prophets are saying. Their denying of the verses of God, concealing the truth, whatever, is not random, it's because they don't like what God's verses are saying. So that's once again a case of them subjecting God's guidance under themselves rather than subjecting themselves to God's guidance. Basically, they don't want to follow God's guidance. They want God's guidance to be whatever they want. And finally, I would add that this is the point here is not to just condemn them, actually. In fact, God encourages them to do better and to believe and to correct this tendency. The point is even more so, I find, to warn the believers implicitly, because the believers are also receiving guidance and have the capacity to have the absolute same failure to not let God's guidance be above them, or to not follow God's guidance, basically, and to just could put it many ways, to view themselves as inherently superior, to view the guidance as belonging to them by right, etc., etc. So now I'll move to the AI summary or AI analysis for the same verses. We've already gone through the surah overall briefly when we were starting the surah, so it already has an idea about the theme of the surah as it regards guidance. Brother Turkey asked an interesting question. Actually, I wonder why the children of Israel get so much mercy. I think the proper phrasing is they get so much favor, because God emphasized like 3 times in the surah, I favored you. Remember my favor, my delight, which I delighted upon you. نِعَمَّتِي الَّتِي أَنْعَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَأَنِّي فَضَّلْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ, and I favored you over the beings. He says that twice, I believe. He also says the formulation, with fulfill my pledge, I'll fulfill your pledge. So 3 times, emphasizing either the ni'amah, the blessing, if you will, or fadl, favor. They're given the favor, but that doesn't mean it's mercy. I mean, it is a mercy if you follow it, but if you don't follow it, it's more like a burden. So really, I find just technically, they were given favor primarily. They were favored over the beings. God chose them. I think it's to do with their lineage, because them being the lineage of Abraham and being the lineage of Israel, meaning Jacob, and because of certain people amongst them, such as Musa, etc. God had mercy upon them. Right. Higher responsibility, higher punishment, absolutely, but also higher chance for, not higher chance for reward, like greater reward as well, it multiplies in both directions, I find. But anyway, I really think it's a case of God choosing them, as they say, but not in the way they mean it. So God really did choose them, um, but it's not due to their personal merit necessarily. The point is, like, these verses demonstrate that they're not superior. As soon as God saves them, they go to worship the calf. Musa is absolutely like special, and Harun and certain of them for sure, but as a whole, they're not inherently special. They're very human and make big mistakes over and over. So it can't be because they themselves are inherently superior. In fact, the opposite is what God is emphasizing here. So the best way I could answer it, continuing, is like it's a conditional sort of choosing. God chose them in a conditional way where he chose to give them the guidance that they will follow it, and they're supposed to also propagate it to other people, which they did at points. A lot of people learned about monotheism through contact with the Jews, etc. So basically, God chose them with a huge responsibility, which is a huge favor if they follow it, and a huge burden if they don't. But later, since God now has shifted the revelation away from them, he also demonstrates that he doesn't need them at the same time. So there's no dependency for God upon them as a nation. And the whole time, they're the ones who are dependent upon God. So inshallah, that makes sense, yeah. Now, so this is the section, once again, to summarize verse 40 through 61, from where God says, O children of Israel, remember my blessing which I blessed upon you, and fulfill my pledge. I will fulfill your pledge, and be afraid of only me, all the way through the verse 61, when it says, when they call for other food to be given to them, and Musa says, go down to Egypt and you will have what you ask. And then God says, and they were struck with humiliation and poverty and returned with anger from God. That is because they were denying the signs of God and killing the prophets without right. That is for what they disobeyed and were transgressing. And after this verse, by the way, it goes into a general statement that indeed those who believed and those who were Jews and the Christians and Sabians, whoever believed in God on the last day and worked righteousness, they will have the reward with their Lord, and there's no fear upon them, and they will not grieve. So this is the section we're dealing with. So overall, the AI summarizes that it's a case study of people who received guidance, just like the Quran at this point being revealed. That is the book in which there's no doubt a guidance for the wearing. So God is giving a case study of others who received guidance, resisted it, and exchanged it, which obviously should connect to the current guidance that he's sending down, because you have the capacity to do the same thing. Even they have the capacity to do the same thing twice, because they're receiving the guidance again, so they can just repeat their actions with the new guidance. And the believers who are receiving it, so to speak, for the first time in the Prophet's community have the capacity to behave exactly like the children of Israel, or to follow the guidance. Basically, it says what happens if you receive guidance but do not submit, would be an efficient way to state it. So the initial two verses basically contain the whole logic. It says, remember my favor that I favored upon you, fulfill my covenant, I will fulfill your covenant, and dread me alone, and believe in what I brought down, confirming what is with you, and do not exchange my verses for a small price, and me alone beware. So it covers God's favor upon them, covers the fact that based on his favor they're bound by covenant, covers God bringing down guidance to them again in the form of the Qur'an, for example. They must believe in it rather than protect inherited interests or interests other than God, because it keeps emphasizes me alone beware, me alone dread. Therefore, the opposite of that is dreading other than God and being careful of other than God. So they need to believe rather than beware of other things and follow other interests. They must embody submission through prayer, purification giving, bowing, patience, etc. They must remember that they will meet their Lord and return to him. They basically have to have a submissive internal in order to follow the guidance, which is to submit to God anyway. If their internal is not in submission and their external actions, then they have no chance of accepting the guidance, let alone following it. So that covers pretty much the first few verses. Then we get to 53. And when we gave Musa the book and the criterion that you may be guided. So the phrasing here is interesting. It says, God gives the book so you may be guided. The book does not automatically guide you, just like at the opening of this surah where God says it's a guidance for the wary, who stand the prayer, who believe in the unseen, stand the prayer, spend out of what we provided them. So it guides those people who have the submissive internal and external qualities. They submit in their actions and their internal state. Therefore, the book guides them. But those who do not, as it says at the beginning of the surah, who deny, it's the same whether you warn them or not, it doesn't work. So it doesn't guide those people. So similarly, God gave them the book so they may be guided with Musa. The book does not automatically guide them. It's just an opportunity for guidance. It is guidance, but it does not necessitate that they will follow it. That's up to them. Oh, I guess it has a couple more points here. It makes the good point, basically, divine favor should produce submission, not entitlement, which is basically like saying not arrogance, which is the opposite of submission. Divine favor can make somebody arrogant and just think they're better, which is the opposite of submission, because submission is like a form of humbleness. So, fulfill my covenant, kind of, and believe in what I sent down, confirming what is with you. It makes a really good statement here. Their relationship is covenantal. Guidance and following it means honoring the allegiance owed to God. they cannot claim loyalty to an earlier revelation while refusing the same God who now brings down. That I had made this point myself by God's permission. Basically, when they deny the Quran, which is confirming what is with them, they're also denying what is with them at the same time. You cannot keep one and deny the other because it's the same message. Therefore, you deny the Torah when you deny the Quran, and you deny your covenant. Two striking constructions of dread me alone and beware of me alone continues to strengthen the connection between guidance, submission, and wariness in this surah. Huda, Islam, if you will, and taqwa. So as I had also mentioned by God's permission, it's saying that it's implying there are obstacles to belief or following guidance, which may consist of how their community will react to them following, like a non-Jew, how they will lose status or their inherited identity, because their religion is highly tied to their identity and to their lineage. Political consequences or social displacement. These are the things that would strongly keep a person who is Jewish, shall we say, from believing, if you will, but none of them are rational and none of them place God in his proper status and his proper fear and his proper wariness. So all of them constitute disloyalty to God if they're the motivation that they allow to control them. God, as it says, cuts through all that and says, be wary of me alone. So taqwa necessarily produces submission to God's command, even if doing so conflicts with communal interest. He says, do not be the first denier of it. Believe in what I sent down, confirming what is with you, and do not be the first denier of it. And do not sell my signs for a small price, or my verses. And do not clothe the truth with falsehood, and conceal the truth while you know. And these, it says, are all forms of refusing guidance while retaining religious knowledge. So you have the book, yet you can deny the book when it comes to you. You can exchange God's signs for a small price in form of denial when they come to you, or in form of not following what you have. Both are selling his signs. And then you can have the truth yet conceal it. You can have the truth yet mix it with falsehood. So once again, having the truth or having the guidance is not the same as following it. You can literally even have extensive knowledge and understand the guidance, yet still does not mean you follow it. They can know the truth, it says, and still not submit to it, which is a direct continuation of Iblis. Iblis did not fail because he lacked information. He failed because he lacked submission, basically. He had the information. They're commanded to uphold the prayer, give the purification, bow with those who bow. This is quite interesting. It's basically both do the actions, but bow with those who bow, like do God's commands in terms of his primary commands of prayer and giving purification. But bow with those who bow, basically join those who are bowing, even if implicitly they happen to be non-Jews, which is very big taboo for them. They have to join the people who submitted, not the people who are necessarily of their ethnicity or lineage. Otherwise, they're being arrogant by default and not submitting. The contradiction of teaching without submission, when God says, "Do you command the people to reverence and forget yourselves while you recite the book?" Yeah. Almost the perfect summary, it says, of the section's problem: they possess and recite guidance without following it. They have the book, they have the knowledge, they can even teach it to others, yet they fail to embody what the book requires. So once again, having guidance is not equal to being guided. Being guided means following it, which means submitting. Then God explains why submission can feel heavy. Seek help through patience and prayer, and indeed it is great except upon the meek or humble. Why is submission difficult except for the humble? Because it requires surrender of ego, status, inherited assumptions, immediate interests, social pressure. You have to basically give up everything to God, or in light of God's superiority. But all these various interests, various motivations, which tend to control people's lives, must be surrendered. And that's difficult for someone who's not humble. And the humble, it says, are defined by eschatological orientation in the verses, those who reckon that they will meet their Lord and that they will return to Him. So those who view that they're accountable to God, basically, and they originate from God and they return to Him, that itself is an aspect of guidance, key aspect, to know your destination and your origin, basically. And it makes one humble by default, because they realize that they're not in charge, God is in charge, they return to Him, they're not going to be here eternally, nor can they escape God's judgment. However you want to describe it, it's humbling. Next point, favor does not cancel judgment. Connecting to, O children of Israel, remember my delight, which I delighted upon you, and that I favored you over the beings. And beware a day that no soul will avail another soul at all, and will not be accepted from it intercession, and not is taken from it equivalence, and not are they supported. So it destroys, it says, the possible inference that God favored us, therefore our communal status guarantees us. Since God has favored us, therefore our community is favored, and our community is sufficient as a source of security. No, it says divine favor creates responsibility rather than immunity. Same God who bestowed the favor is the judge. So He favored them over the beings, yet there's a day when no other being can avail for another. Then we get to 49. And when we saved you from the family of Pharaoh, marking you with foul torment, slaughtering your sons, and keeping alive your women, and that was an immense test from your Lord. And when we parted with you the sea, so we saved you and drowned the family of Pharaoh while you were observing. And when we promised Musa 40 nights, furthermore you took the calf from after him while you were wrongers. Furthermore, we pardoned you from after that you may be grateful. And we gave Musa the book and the criterion that you may be guided. And when we gave Musa the book and the criterion that you may be guided. So God recalls various favors, saving them from Pharaoh, etc., all of which are basically connected to the Exodus, so to speak, them leaving Egypt, being saved, and receiving the Torah, or the tablets, at the mountain. And them taking the calf also at the mountain. Yes, so obviously it also notices the contrast between the fact that God saves them incredibly from their greatest oppressor. He splits the sea for them to see, saves them, destroys their greatest enemy before their eyes, which are enormous signs, yet almost immediately they take the calf while they're wrongdoers. It says it's like the most dramatic demonstration of the thematic binary of God guiding and then them associating. Really, it's like God saving and guiding and them still not following the guidance, because the point that being guided is not the same as following it, or like receiving guidance and mercy and favor and etc. It's not the same as following it. So it's quite interesting. It says like, okay, so when God saves them, and their response should have been submission, yet they associate to God. Then God pardons them after associating, that they may be grateful, it says in the Quran. We pardoned you after that you may be grateful. So God again expected gratitude. So He has mercy upon them after their association. Gratitude was expected, and submission therefore. It's like you failed to be grateful to God the first time. God had mercy upon you, so now He expects you to be grateful the second time. And when we gave Musa the book and the criterion that you may be guided, it says the sequence is rescue, failure, forgiveness, book, opportunity for guidance. God repeatedly reopens the path. And that actually speaks to, like, I believe, general human experience. It's very potent demonstration of the children of Israel, but everyone experiences, I feel, something similar. God does not just give like one opportunity for guidance, I find. He does what He wills, of course, but the way I see it more often is God gives opportunity for guidance. People constantly fall short. He pardons them, gives more opportunities, and only the ones who like habitually and repeatedly refuse guidance and in no scenario accept it, only those are the ones who are condemned. Then, and when Musa said to his people, O my people, indeed you wronged yourselves by your taking of the calf. So repent to your originator. So kill yourselves, that is better for you, not your originator. So he repented upon you. Indeed, he is the reverting, the merciful. One side point, I think association does not harm God. It damages the person who abandons their orientation, basically abandons and destroys their chance for guidance. And the cure is turn back to your originator. So basically, association is the act of turning away from God as your sole object of devotion, and turning back to Him is the only possible solution. Verse 55, and when you said, O Musa, we will not believe in you until we see God openly. So seized you the bolt while you were observing. This is another form of refusing submission. It's literally a case of not believing in the unseen. They need to see it. That's the first thing that the surah opens with. Guidance for the wary, those who believe in the unseen. They're effectively saying, we'll determine the conditions under which we will believe. It's actually worse than that. They're saying that they need proof, basically. We'll believe if you prove it to us, which is not even belief anymore, it's just acknowledgement of irrefutable reality. Alaikum salam, brother Saad. So again, it says the issue, is not the lack of signs. They've already seen Pharaoh's destruction, the sea being split, themselves rescued, etc., the mercy, the tablets, presumably. Yet they demand more. So the issue is not it's not even lack of evidence. It's simply just lack of submission, lack of faith, or lack of desire to follow the guidance. Whether or not they realize that they actually don't want to follow the guidance, they're trying to weasel their way out of it. It's actually very similar to the example of the cow later that comes up, where they're told to slaughter the cow and they're asking all sorts of questions. It's out of it, whether or not they realize it's out of the desire to not do it. Anyway, next verse, and we shaded upon you with clouds and brought down upon you the manna and the salwa, the manna and the quails. Eat from the goods of what we provided you, and they did not wrong us, however, they were themselves wronging. So, let's see. It connects to the phrase, they did not wrong us, but they were wronging themselves. Failure to submit, or you could say failure to follow God's guidance, does not diminish God. The misguided person's rebellion turns against himself. Obviously, because if you don't follow God's guidance, you are the one who does not get guided. So you are the one who suffers as a result. Guidance is not arbitrary. It literally determines where you end up. Also, an interesting question in the chat. What does Allah say about eating grain? Is it a food source or is it something that sprouts fruits? Not sure I quite understand. Which verse are you referencing? Or just in general? And what would be the difference between a food source or something that sprouts fruits? Like obviously grain is, the seeds are where the food comes from, I believe. So you take the seeds, grind them, and then you get flour, for instance. Now, verse 58, and when we said enter this town, so eat from it wherever you willed amply, and enter the gate prostrating, and say, unburdening, we will forgive for you your sins, and we will increase the doers of good. So they're told to enter the town, eat freely, enter prostrating, etc. The command is generous, it says provision plus submission plus forgiveness plus increase. Basically provision, increase, forgiveness, almost everything beautiful as long as submission, entering prostrating, if you will. And this is even after they failed with regards to the calf. So still they have the opportunity for total forgiveness, total mercy, increase, provision, as long as they submit, but they refuse literally to follow the command, which is them refusing just to submit at that point. So they changed to a saying other than was said to them. It says a perfect miniature of misguidance. The issue is not an impossible command, they simply substitute what God said. Mirroring the pattern, God gives guidance, people alter, conceal, selectively obey, or replace it, all which are means of not following it. Instead of following what God said, they replace God's direction with their own. This is what I mean when I say, like, they don't subject themselves under the guidance, they subject God's guidance under them. So verse 36, 33. And a sign for them is the dead earth. We brought it to life and brought out from it grain, and from it they eat. $6.99 as well. And he is the one who sent down from the sky water, so brought out with it all of all growth. So we brought out from it like greenery, from which we brought out grains or grain in layers. So yes, for grain, I'm not sure if this exactly addresses the correct question, but anyway, the food source is, just look it up here as well. Right, the food source is in the form of the edible seeds, which come from cereal, grasses, or similar plants. Just from a quick search, these dry seed kernels provide a major source of energy, carbohydrates, and nutrients for people all over the world, obviously being one of the main staple foods in the world alongside rice and corn. Corn is also technically a grain, I believe, and maybe even rice. Yeah, rice is also a cereal grain, so technically they're all grains. So you have three parts of the seed: the bran, endosperm, and germ. The germ is the inner core that contains healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals. As it says, common types of grains: rice, staple food for more than half the world; wheat, used for flour, bread, and pasta; corn, used as food, animal feed, and meal, and used in all sorts of foods nowadays; oats and barley also are examples. So I guess the wheat produces the grain, and the grain itself is the food, I would say. Something like that. Then we get to, we're almost done. I know we're a bit over, but we started late anyway. Verse 60 and 61. 60 says, "And when Musa sought water for his people, so he said, 'Strike with your staff the stone.' So gush from it 12 springs. Already knew every people their drinking place. Eat and drink from the provision of God, and do not tangle in the earth as corrupters." Here it says, God provides, therefore they have the responsibility to not corrupt. But I find it kind of misses a bit of a point here. It says misguidance turns provision into a context for corruption. Yes, something like that. I think it's paralleling God's provision, because it says eat and drink from the provision of God, and the opposite of that is corrupting the earth. It's hard to articulate. Okay, so basically the way I would articulate it is like they're given the provision of God in the form of, in this case, water and whatever food God provided. And God is telling them to eat of what God gave them, elsewhere also gratefully. Now, where transgression comes from is the desire for something else besides what God gave in any context. So God gives guidance, and the desire for something else is what's out of bounds and leads to misguidance. In this case, God gave food and water, and the desire for something else is what leads to corruption. Then verse 61 exactly mirrors this when they say we'll never be, able to endure a singular food, so call your Lord to bring out for us from the earth what it sprouts of herbs and cucumbers and garlic or grain and its lentils and onions. So, like I said earlier, the problem here is not with lentils or with onions. The problem is with their lack of satisfaction with what God provides them. So their desire for something beyond what God provides, beyond what God gave, which exactly mirrors their killing of the prophets. They're not happy with what the prophets are saying. They want something else. Their denial of the verses of God, whether in their revelation or in the present revelation, out of not being happy with the message. SubhanAllah. Yes, and it also relates to the story of Adam, which is the absolute, which the surah kind of starts with in terms of the stories or retellings, which is exactly the case of God provides all fruits lawful and just one is forbidden. And for Adam, it's like the desire for what is beyond what God provided, or basically not being satisfied with what God provided. Anyway, to the request, it says Musa replies, would you exchange what is lower for what is better? And the surah actually talks a lot about exchanging so far. It says they exchange guidance for misguidance or astraness. They exchange the closer life, the lower life. It's actually the same expression that Musa uses here. Hayat al-dunya. They exchange the lower or closer life for the hereafter. It says the fundamental problem is misevaluation. What God provides is not enough. Something else is preferred. It says misguidance appears as a bad trade produced by incorrect valuation. And I would even take it further and say incorrect valuation with respect to God. The person basically incorrectly values God. yeah, then it culminates in that same verse with they were struck with humiliation, misery, etc., humiliation and poverty, and returned with anger from God. And it says because they were denying God's signs and killing the prophets without right, for what they disobeyed and were transgressing. It's quite a striking escalation. It goes from something that seems like harmless, of wanting other food, within a step in the same verse, to killing the prophets. And I think that's intentional, because it's linking just the feeling, just the desire for something outside of what God provided, or better to say, to not be satisfied with what God provided, with all the way to the highest transgression of killing the prophets, if you will, in that sense. There's even like a verse from Surah 9 kind of fits this theme well. If only they had said, this is about the people of the, like, relating to the prophet, the hypocrites and stuff. It's not even about the Jews anymore, but it says, if only they had said, and if only they had been pleased with what God gave them and his messenger, and said, sufficient for us is God, he will give us of his bounty and his messenger. Indeed, we long to God. To God we desire or long. It even makes a table here. Let's see. Basically, I find the surah is summarizing the same point in a purely binary way between following guidance or not following it, in many parallel formulations, including serving God alone, which is the object of guidance, what the message is, and taking the cap, basically associating to God. Being wary of God alone, being wary of other than him, fearing your other considerations or prioritizing other things. Believing in what God sends down, and obviously each of these were mentioned in this section, which is why we're talking about them. Believing in what God sends down, denying the revelation that confirms it. Following the book, reciting it but failing to embody it. Accepting God's signs, or in their case, demanding additional signs on their own terms, such as show us God. Receiving God's command versus substituting what was commanded. Receiving provision gratefully versus not being satisfied with God's provision. Fulfilling the covenant versus breaking the covenant. Submitting versus disobeying. I don't know if I would exactly put those. But anyway, remaining within limits versus transgressing. Following guidance versus denying the signs. Okay, you could do that. Receiving favor and blessings, which God substitutes with wrath when they refuse to enter the Holy Land. It says now, furthermore, like there's an irony in that the children of Israel were surrounded by guidance, yet none of those mechanically makes them guided. And I think that's the point. Guidance is not proximity to revelation. Guidance is submission to revelation or submission to God. it says, it says, the essence of a guided position is remarkably simple. God speaks and the servant submits. MashaAllah. Any other thoughts or points to add? If not, I think we'll wrap up, inshallah, and tomorrow we'll have another session, and this time we'll be resuming on verse 62, inshallah. So I hope to see you guys there. Peace, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.